In the late 80s, I was in my early 20s, and two friends and I went camping in Central Florida. Two of us were working for the Park Service at that time, so we were able to camp for free in other parks in the state. Both of us had done a lot of camping before. Me, I grew up camping with my family on every single vacation all over the state. For the other friend with us, this was her first camping trip ever. We were camping in the youth area, which was empty that weekend and was quieter and more isolated than the regular campsites. Later in the afternoon, on the second day of our trip, we were all sort of spread out in the area of the campsite, being within shouting distance, but enjoying a little solitude. I was collecting firewood. Every now and then, I'd kind of feel like someone was watching me. I'd look around, see and hear nothing, and then shrug it off and go back to what I was doing. Later, on around sunset, we had the bonfire started. One of the rangers, who lived on site about a quarter-mile away, came over with a truckload of firewood and a six-pack of beer. We all sat around, talking for a while. Well, after dark, I could suddenly hear what was probably a bunch of teenagers fooling around on one side of the trails a couple of miles away. Since the trails were closed at sunset, the ranger and my coworker drove off to shoot them back to their campsites. My other friend and I were just relaxing around the fire, talking a little, mostly enjoying the night and the peace and quiet. All of a sudden, I had a cold chill go over me. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and out of nowhere, I was terrified. I tried to ignore it, but it kept building. I didn't say anything to my friend. I didn't want to scare her. Then, I glanced over at her just as she glanced at me, and she said, "Do you feel that?" I said, "Yeah. I think maybe we'd better go to the car." We both felt like we were in deadly danger, but no idea from what. We started walking at a casual pace, not wanting to appear scared. Then halfway to the car, we looked at each other again and simultaneously broke into a dead run. We reached the car, jumped in and locked the doors, and turned on the headlights. I sat there with my pistol, feeling like it was totally inadequate for whatever was out there. We both just sat there, looking straight ahead. We were too afraid to look around. I had the feeling at one point that if I turned my head and looked out the window, I'd see something that would drive me insane. I don't know how long we sat there. It was probably just a few minutes, but it felt like forever. Then it just left. We could actually feel it going away. A few minutes after that, the other two came back in the truck. We kind of laughed it off afterward, but I'll tell you, I've never been that scared before or since. I faced a lot in my life, and nothing has so completely terrified me like that. I don't know what it was, but I'm still convinced we were in danger. When I was 13, I went to a summer camp in northern Scotland. When we were there, I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. On the 14th night I was there, I started to notice that something kept moving past the window during the nights. The few previous nights I had noticed it, but just kind of brushed it off, as it was always around 2 a.m. and I was too tired. But this night was different. I was sitting on my phone for about 4 hours, just watching YouTube, when I saw the thing move past the window again. Initially, like always, I just brushed it off and left it. But then I realized that the shape moving past the window had actually stopped in the window, as if it had seen me or something. I had no idea what to even rationalize it with. I was just frozen in fear. My best friend at the time, Logan, was in the bunk underneath me, and my older brother, John, in the bunk across from me. So I woke them up and told them the story of this weird figure. Halfway through telling it, I looked at the window again and could distinctively see 2 eyes staring at Logan. I kept my cool and said quietly to Logan and John, "Don't look now, but that thing I'm telling you about is now staring at you, Logan." Logan instantly jumped and turned to look at the window, when we saw it had now moved closer to the window. We all screamed and jumped back into bed when we saw John get up to try and go outside and see what that thing was. Logan was adamant that this thing was some sort of unholy creature sent by the devil. Keep in mind, he was a diehard Christian, and I just didn't want to go outside. After the figure not moving for a good moment, we all decided just to go outside and confront this thing. We slowly edged our way out to the door and round the side of the building where the window was, when we started to hear what sounded like human breathing. Me and Logan looked for a large stone and stick respectively so we could protect ourselves. All 3 of us jumped around the corner at the same time to confront this creature. When we saw it, on all 4s, run away. All I know is it left behind a horrible smell and what looked like a large piece of skin. I work as a counselor at a summer camp in Southern California. The place is very out in the woods, so we get all sorts of animals wandering through, from deers and foxes, coyotes howling in the distance, even a mountain lion that's been spotted in the area. The camp also occasionally has a spiritual, haunted vibe. There are a couple of creepy and weird spots, just some things in the area that we think show the place has been inhabited in the past, ghost stories, etc. One night, after putting my kids to bed, I was standing outside our cabin talking to another counselor when my friend Sadie comes running by with her entire teenage girls' cabin, maybe 12 of them, all dressed in black and freaking the hell out. She screams at me that she thought they heard a strange sound, and once her kids were asleep, she'd meet me back here to explain and investigate. Sadie is normally the level-headed type, not to freak out easily, so this really caught my attention. She meets me back by my cabin, maybe 30 minutes later, and explains what was going on. So, she took her campers on a night hike, had them all dressed up in black and pretend to be ninjas. All was fun until on their way back, they passed a particularly dark part of the trail when they heard off in the distance, just beyond the tree line, what sounded like a faint help from a small child. But each time they heard it, it got more and more distorted until it no longer sounded human, yet still sounded like a little child yelling help in the distance. Naturally, they freaked the heck out and ran. Me and Sadie decide to be good counselors and go investigate the sound of a small child yelling help. This immediately freaked me out, based on the idea that this could have been one of our own kids on the campsite, which we are responsible for, especially when it comes to their safety. But Sadie swore that she did a head count while on the hike and when they got back. As we walk over to the area of the trail, we hear it. It didn't sound like a small child anymore. It sounded like a demon screeching out its best impression of a child, and it didn't sound like it was coming from any point source, but more was coming from an entire mountainside. We booked it back to safety of the main part of camp, where we will tell this story to anyone who will listen. The next day, the camp director had a meeting where they told us to tell our campers not to freak out at the sound of bobcats in the forest. They are harmless, but do make a high-pitched yelping sound at night. Our friends wouldn't let us live that one down all summer. But it just startles me. That verbiage, it sounded way too real to just be an animal. The story still creeps me out from time to time.